one upon another. Unique, abstract dabs of color. The myriad brushstrokes that comprise a work of art. Fitting together like pieces of a puzzle, line and form become design. Ideas become reality. Alan Bean, artist, former astronaut, fourth man to walk upon the moon, commander of NASA's Skylab during 59 days in orbit, living symbol of modern technological achievement.
A few years ago, I stood on the moon and looked back at the Earth. The experience was mind-boggling. But all of us at NASA predicted it would happen long before it did. Our space program, after all, doesn't send someone off on a spacecraft and just hope we'll get back safely. Instead, it's a careful, deliberate effort by a multitude of talented and dedicated people that culminates in a predictable success. Now, that's a great achievement. But is it the greatest achievement of our modern era?
If you could pick the greatest achievements throughout time, what would you pick? Would it be the invention of the wheel? Maybe you'd select the invention of computer technology. A lot of people would agree. But I believe the greatest achievement of the modern age is something else. Something that can't be claimed by a single individual. Something that no one group of explorers or engineers or doctors can call their exclusive discovery. I'm not speaking of an object or a device. I'm speaking of a process that mathematician and philosopher Alfred North Whitehead has called the invention of the art of invention. This is the process of combining new knowledge with things we already know, of fitting pieces of information together to achieve a single goal, little by little, layer by layer, almost like the creation of a painting. When I stood on the moon and looked up, the sight was spellbinding. Earth, a blue-green treasure hanging in space. It seemed so fragile to me. I thought about the Earth's ability to provide for our needs. I thought about humankind's responsibility to study this home of ours and to protect and preserve it. And I thought about how I'd gotten to the moon.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
All the calculated effort was aimed at predicting and overcoming obstacles before we encountered them. The pooled knowledge from dozens of scientific and engineering disciplines, the detailed testing and retesting over thousands of days, ensured the success of our space missions. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The process of achievement, of which Alan Bean speaks, the invention of the art of invention, directs and shapes hundreds of scientific endeavors. At any one time, scientists work on thousands of new ideas to advance knowledge and improve the world. Today, one of the most important subjects is the science of managing radioactive waste. The goal is the safe, permanent disposal of nuclear waste in stable underground repositories. Dr. Richard Wilson is Mallinckrodt Professor of Physics and Chairman of the Physics Department at Harvard University.
Radioactive waste comes from our use of naturally occurring radioactive materials. These are mined from the earth. Some become the tools of modern medicine, some are used in research and in industrial processes, and others become the fuel for electricity generating plants. When nuclear material is used to generate electricity, the raw fuel, the uranium, is refined and processed and ultimately manufactured into half-inch pellets about the size of your fingertip. The pellets are then encased in long, thin tubes known as fuel rods. Groups of these rods are packaged together to form fuel assemblies. These assemblies are then placed in the reactor core at a nuclear power plant. In a modern reactor, neutrons strike some of the uranium atoms in the fuel pellets, causing them to split apart or fission. A tremendous amount of energy is given off in the process in the form of heat, which in turn generates steam to produce electricity. After about 3 years, the fuel rods in the reactor have given up much of their useful energy and are removed from the core. These spent fuel assemblies are now highly radioactive. The rods and pellets inside them retain byproducts of the chain reaction, some of which constitute what is known as high-level waste. There are other nuclear byproducts known as low-level waste that come from medical, scientific, and industrial processes, and from nuclear reactors too. But high-level waste is what we're talking about here. After their removal from the reactor core, the rods are temporarily stored for a period of several years in pools of water located at the plant. Their radiation is safely shielded, and both their radioactivity and heat diminish greatly. But the pools aren't intended to hold the spent fuel indefinitely, and since direct exposure to spent fuel would be harmful, or even fatal, there's the need to establish a permanent disposal place, a repository in a deep rock formation that will not change, that will remain essentially dry, and that will safely isolate the radioactive waste for thousands of years.
Discoveries from the past have provided scientists with important insights.
I find it difficult to describe what I felt when I entered that inner chamber. For a surety, I never dreamt I should gaze upon the amazing sights which met our eyes.
Those were the words of Lord Carnarvon on February 17, 1923, when he and Howard Carter broke through to the burial chamber of King Tutankhamun, who reigned over Egypt more than 1,000 years before the birth of Christ. Those fabulous treasures, preserved as they were the day they were buried, provide additional information on what happens, under certain circumstances, to objects which are stored underground for long periods of time. Deep inside the caves at Lascaux in southwest France, the paintings of Ice Age artists can still be seen. When archaeologists study the conditions of these Paleolithic pictures and how underground rock formations have preserved them for well over 10,000 years, we compile a good deal of evidence about how underground rock formations could be used to isolate man-made materials.